Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. Satellite shows a big circulation here off to the southeast of Kodiak, right in that area, and the occluded front up along the coast. Several bands of moisture rotating inland and dissipating. This is mostly just high cirrus here and a fair amount of sunshine seen from the Yukon Delta right up across the Tanana Valley, and then some more hazy sunshine farther to the south, but most of the rainfall occurring just off the coast and pretty gusty winds in advance of the front, as high as 40 miles per hour at Middleton Island and Kodiak Island, the state airport there, seeing gusts of 35 miles per hour with some occasional rain today and fog. Augustine Island had gusts closer to 50 miles per hour, and gale warnings are out tonight or this evening from Cape Edgecombe to Cape Fairweather, and then out all night here all along the North Gulf Coast and across the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, as well as Shelikof Strait. And otherwise, again, just some variable cloudiness coming back in across most of the moisture occurring here west of the eastern Aleutians, so kind of in a break there today. And then an upper level trough right through this area, producing a narrow band of some light snow there from northeast Norton Sound all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, Dead Horse, Barter Island, carrying a little bit of light snow and fog at times, but amounts quite light, and temperatures a little chillier back to the west. And out to the west, a narrow area high pressure right through here ahead of that next frontal system, which is slowly moving to the east. We'll see for tonight that just really begins to weaken as it pushes into that narrow ridge of high pressure. Otherwise, low pressure here, still southeast of Kodiak Island, pulling a little bit farther back to the north in the front, still right along the coast. That's why the gale warnings stay out tonight for the North Gulf Coast areas, but you can see as it moves inland, dropping off late this evening for the central panhandle and the coast there. Areas of rain, light rain at times. Again, not much moisture making it too far inland, but mostly along the coast and western Prince William Sound, and possibly some moisture showing up along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, but just some hit and miss, widely scattered snow showers out here, mostly of snow around the Perbilofs, mixture of rain or snow here, depending on your elevation and the time of the evening or night for the Alaska Peninsula, but nothing too terribly heavy. And with that upper level trough up here back to the northwest, kind of a still extensive area of very light snow or flurries from the eastern Arctic coast, back down in toward the Brooks Range, possibly Anatuvik, maybe Adigan overnight tonight, and then a few isolated snow showers possibly over the Wrangell Mountains. Otherwise, just variably cloudy here from the west-southwest coast northeastward across the upper Yukon Valley. And for Sunday, tomorrow, another trough keeps it wet. Showers or just rain, that south to north flow has showers coming northward, interact with the terrain, kind of turns into a basic occasional light rain pattern here with that trough as it comes up to the north. But the gale warnings will end, a little bit less wind, but still brisk, Barren Islands to just west of Middleton Island. And winds also diminishing here out to the west on the back side of this system, but still hold some showers in over the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty fair otherwise through the interior day, much like today. Could be some hit and miss light rain or snow showers there either side of that trough axis extending up toward Arctic Village, and still best chance of some light snow, occasional flurries or light snow, some fog along the Arctic coast, and winds starting to increase tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. Otherwise, out here to the Aleutians, that front trying to push eastward actually does break off and come through the ridge. The whole pattern shifts to the east with that hot ridge axis right through here. Now, very weak, that front. All that's left are a few rain and snow showers there from about St. George down into the eastern Aleutians. Otherwise, light wind conditions, and then a stronger system develops and moves up to the central Aleutians. Right now, it looks like 25, 30 knot winds associated with that at this point in time, mostly for the central Aleutians, and then wrapping in back on the west side there. And also for Monday, increasing winds, brisk wind advisories will be out from the entire eastern Arctic coast, or entire stretch of the Arctic coast there, the east side up to 30 knots at times, and 25 knots to 30 knots there on the west side, but much lighter in toward Kotzebue Sound, mostly from the northwest, or just variable. And another system develops in a trough here with a weak low moving up to the southern southeast coast. The heaviest rain will probably be over the southern areas in the Queen Charlottes, lighter amounts up to the north, mostly in the form of showers, and again, the scattered to widely scattered rain and snow showers, mainly over the mountainous terrain, the Wrangell Mountains, possibly the Talkeetnas, Chugach, that sort of pattern. Mostly fair, though. Fair amount of sunshine, again, possible for the Tanana Valley, portions of the upper Yukon Valley. 40-mile country looking really good at this point in time. Staying dry out here back along the west coastal areas. Just a few showers possible over the Kuskokwim Valley on down toward Augustine Island and Iliamna. And temperatures today along the southeast coast, 40s to lower 50s, 51 at Skagway, warmest location in the state today. These are all mid to late afternoon readings. 39 Gulkana, 43 degrees today in Valdez, Sitka 48, about that in Yakutat with 46, 49 in Homer, and Anchorage 45 degrees, 41 up at Talkeetna, and Northway 42, Delta 45 degrees. They're seeing some gusty southeast winds up to about 25, 30 miles an hour, as was Healy. Otherwise, mid-40s through the Tanana Valley. Farther to the north, you can see temperatures contrasted from below zero here on the western Arctic coast at -9 at Point Lay to a little below or a little above zero for the western, or for the east side there, with 5 above at Kaktovik. Otherwise, below zero here over the northeast or the northwest part of the state. Kotzebue at -3, but Kivalina up to 9. 1 at Shishmaref, St. Lawrence Island, 16 degrees at Savunga, with 37 here at Anvik, and 44 McGrath, lower to mid-40s all the way down the river valley there to Bethel with 46 degrees, 27 at Makoriak, and right near the freezing point there for the Pribilofs, St. Paul at 31, St. George 33, 42 on Alaska, mid-30s for the Aleutians, Shimia 38 degrees. Lows tonight ranging from, well, below zero along the Arctic coast here to 10 to 15 below over the western north slope areas there, to teens to lower 20s, especially when you get down toward Fairbanks. Low about 21 tonight, and mid-20s here into the Copper River Basin with Gulkana, forecast low at 19. Northway should drop to 13 degrees. Eagle forecast low of 12. 5 degrees for Savunga and Gamble, with mid-20s for the Pribilofs. The Aleutians, lower 30s to mid-30s over the Fox Islands, and then mid to upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. King Salmon looking at a low tonight of about freezing, and lower 30s here south of the mountains across the Kenai Peninsula and the North Gulf Coast, with upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Those heights tomorrow, about like today, mostly in the 40s down here. Some areas could reach the lower 50s again, with upper 30s to mid-40s over the southeast interior. Tanana Valley could rise into the lower 50s there around Fairbanks and Nenana, but then cooling back to 20 there at Anatuvik with a high of 18, a little more elevation there. Staying below zero on the western Arctic coast, east side though, rising a little above zero, about the same here over the Kotzebue Sound area. 17 forecast high for Nome, and 25 for St. Paul, with lower 40s again for the peninsula. Highs tomorrow in the 30s out over the Aleutians. Flying weather, a band of IFR along that frontal boundary here up along the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, maybe even areas of the Wrangell Island or the Wrangell Mountains, with a band pushing inland here, so improving along the south coast later in the day to marginal VFR. Possible IFR showing up along the western Alaska range there on the eastern slopes, but VFR over toward the Kuskokwim Valley. And for the upper level trough producing an area of IFR due to snow and lower ceilings there from the eastern Arctic coast right down into the Brooks Range area, and areas of IFR possible for the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians. Otherwise, expect marginal VFR over much of the Bering Sea and the central and western chain of the Aleutians. Anaktuvik, IFR becomes marginal tomorrow. And again, same forecast, kind of bouncing back and forth between IFR to marginal VFR. Lowest on the northern approaches, Lake Clark and Merrill VFR, trending down to possible IFR. That would be on the eastern entrances. West entrances probably staying VFR the entire day. And for rainy, VFR, again, same pattern, possibly becoming IFR in this eastern entrance, but staying higher on the west side. Windy, possibly seeing some marginal VFR, and that would mostly show up on the southern entrance. Otherwise, VFR conditions. That same forecast for Isabel, VFR, possible marginal VFR south side, and that also good for Mentasta with the southern entrance, seeing any of the marginal VFR. Tanita, possibly on the eastern entrance, marginal VFR, but west entrance wide open. And for Portage, occasional IFR, lowest conditions on the east side, a little bit better to the west. Chilkoot and White, IFR in the forecast tomorrow from morning till afternoon. Freezing levels shows the surface late tonight, early tomorrow morning, northern Panhandle, right up along the coast, 2,000 feet just south of that there across the Kenai Peninsula, northeast or eastern Bristol Bay areas, and then the warmer air aloft here cutting in where the jet stream is just to the south. Looking at icing possibilities, greatest potential below 10 to 12,000 feet will be from south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, the Kenai Peninsula, east and southeast across the Panhandle, right in the vicinity of that slow-moving frontal boundary. Possible hit and miss stuff up here over the northeast of the mixed to possibly rime types of icing there, mostly light. I don't think there'll be too much in the way of anything moderate. And also with circulation out here over the Bering Sea, could be some areas of icing, and then with that next front farther out to the west. Winds aloft showing the jet stream for tomorrow cutting in across the Queen Charlotte Islands there, so that's where most of the action will be down to the south. Still big area of upper level high pressure here west of the Arctic coast there over the Chukchi Sea, and that taking that northern jet up and then down across the central Canadian prairies there with a couple of weak lows at one south of Kodiak Island. 9,000 feet south to north flow, 20 to 30 knots or 25 to 30 knots, diminishes to 20 to 30 knots over the Panhandle, kind of more of a easterly drift, 10 to 20 in areas here over the interior, and then northerlies 25 to 30 knots, strongest up to the northwest, 15 to 20, in some cases 25 knots over the Alaska Peninsula areas. Much the same pattern at 3,000 feet, but northeasterlies wrapping around this low could reach 40 knots at 3,000 feet there over the Aleutian Range, and otherwise 20 knots, south to north flow, 25 to 35 knots, diminishing once it reaches the coast here, taking more of a northwest direction, 10 to 20 knots, and then easterly winds on the increase. That could start as early as tomorrow, 25 knots, up to 30 knots into the Bering, or across Kotzebue Sound, the Bering Strait areas, down to St. Lawrence Island, and then westerlies trying to push that weakening frontal boundary, but they're only about 20 knots. That gradient mostly on the northeast side of that system. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop for the North Gulf Coast here, mostly offshore, maybe Cordova, Cape Yakataga down to Middleton Island, and across Kodiak Island, again with those stronger northeast winds possible there, and then over the western mountains up here to the north. Light to isolated moderate chop here along the entire stretch of the Arctic coast, extends all the way down through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Could be a little bumpy, but nothing too serious over the eastern Aleutians. But this area of turbulence will be a little more extensive on Monday up there along the Arctic coast and the North Slope. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the ice edge and the marine forecasts.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us today is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
My pleasure, Dave.
Thank you. And you're joining us here to talk a little bit more about satellites and how satellites work, and especially one neat feature that's working over Alaska right now. What is that?
Well, there's a lot of weather satellites and a lot of instruments on these satellites, and there are new generations going up and new instruments. This includes something called the day-night band,
Okay.
which is not a cover band at the local bar,
Yeah.
but it's a new satellite that is very useful, especially here in Alaska, especially in the winter.
In the wintertime, yeah, that makes it a little bit hard to use some of the normal tools that we associate with weather satellite imagery.
Right. You know, one of the classic weather satellite instruments is just visible light. What would the human eye see if you were riding on a weather satellite yourself and looked down and it was black and white? You'd see the clouds reflecting the sunlight. And we've got an example from the Pacific Ocean. There's a geostationary satellite, and we can see that the eastern side of the image is in daylight. The western side, it's night over there, so you don't see anything because there's no sunlight over there.
Right.
And visible imagery, it's very intuitive. You see the clouds just like you see them standing on the ground, but now you're a satellite seeing them from above. But the problem is, what about the night side of the planet? How do you track the storms? How do you know where the rain is, the snow, the weather, if you can't see the clouds? And that's why, just like a television can change from one channel to another, or a radio can change stations, satellites can change the frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum that they're looking at. We can go to infrared instead of visible light. You know, it's heat energy. You can see heat, and we've got another satellite picture from the same time, same satellite, out over the Pacific Ocean. That's the infrared side, and we're seeing temperature there. And even at night, when there's no light, everything still has a temperature.
So we're sensing something with a thermometer instead of perhaps the visible side of that, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Okay.
On this depiction, colder features are lighter shades, warmer features are dark. And so clouds tend to be colder than the ground. Clouds are higher in the atmosphere, it's cooler.
Oh, okay.
And so that very same image on the western or the left-hand side of the globe, now we can see the clouds there, even though it's nighttime, because we're seeing the temperatures. And one nice feature is that tropical storm there, just in the middle of the northern hemisphere there, hurricane or typhoon,
That's
depending
that
on
swirly part that we see in the middle of the image?
There you go. You can
Okay.
even see the eye on
Yeah,
it there,
okay.
especially in the infrared image. So we've got two kinds of imagery there from the same satellite, different instruments, you know, different channels like on a television, visible and infrared. You know, it turns out there's no one magic tool. Each has its strengths, each has its flaws, weaknesses. The visible is nice, it's intuitive, it's easier to understand, but doesn't work at night.
Okay.
Infrared is nice, it works at night, you can see temperatures, but there is a catch. What if your clouds and the nearby bare ground or open water, what if those were about the same temperature?
Oh, that's going to be hard to figure out what's going on.
If you can only see temperature and you have two features that are the same temperature, they will look the same. You won't be able to tell. They're camouflaged. This happens, especially, it can happen around Alaska, especially over the ocean when you have low clouds that are the same temperature as the open water.
That happens quite a bit in Alaska. Yeah.
We have an example. Now, this is from a different geostationary satellite. It's down over the Atlantic Ocean. Look in the South Atlantic. In infrared, we've highlighted in a yellow circle there. There's some patches of clouds, but it looks like there's a clear area in the middle of that image.
Sure. Yep.
That's the infrared look. But let's take a look at the visible channel, and we can see there's a stripe of clouds across the middle of that circle that is only visible in the visible.
Okay, right.
The trick here is that those are low clouds of about the same temperature as the surrounding ocean. So from an infrared point of view, where you're seeing temperature, the clouds in the water nearby are the same temperature, they look the same. It's only on the visible that you can see what stands out as the actual imagery.
Okay.
Two tools, each have their strengths and weaknesses. Can we combine them? That's where the day-night band comes in.
Oh, okay.
It's a super sensitive visible sensor that can actually see by moonlight. It can even see the aurora.
Wow.
And in Alaska, we have long winter nights. We can use that day-night band. Here's an example from that storm that blew the Kullik drilling platform ashore near Kodiak Island in December back in 2012. This image is right near when that storm happened, and it's in the middle of the night in December.
But this looks like visible imagery.
Looks like daytime imagery. It's amazing. That sensor can take any little bit of moonlight and just make the most of it. And we can see so much detail. Even in the northern part of the image there, you can see some aurora up there. The northern lights
That's
are...
that band that goes across the Arctic slope?
You got it. That's the northern lights. We're seeing black and white image here, so you don't get the green or the purple colors there.
that?
But that is the aurora. There's another example of the day-night band, and this is from January of 2013. It's about 4 in the morning, and this is a snapshot from Weather Service software. And we can even see in the middle of the image, there's the lights of Fairbanks and North Pole over to Eielson Air Force Base. Anchorage and Matsu lights, city lights, are evident as well.
Sure enough.
We can see, even though it's 4 in the morning in January, there is no sunlight to be had, that just enough moonlight is available that this sensor can see that. So we're trying to solve that puzzle where visible light is good, but only during the daytime. IR is good at night, but you can't see the difference between clouds and ground sometime.
Right.
The day-night band is an attempt to do the best of both with one tool. And it's brand new for Alaska here, and we're hoping to use it in the forecast process and help predict storms, weather patterns, to help get good forecasts for people.
Okay, another tool in the weather toolkit for meteorologists in Alaska and researchers worldwide. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And you can learn more about GINA and the day-night band by going to the web address that you see on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
Okay, we're looking at the ice here in northern Cook Inlet. That's expected to melt over the next few days due to the above normal temperatures that are forecast to continue in the area here. Out over the Bering Sea, there was a little bit of ice west of St. Paul, but that should be melting due to the rapid increase of the sea surface temperatures away from the ice edge there, which looks like it's about 30 to 40 nautical miles to the north there of Northeast Point on St. Paul. And so any of the strips that pull off of that will probably melt quite rapidly in the warmer water temperatures just to the south. And but the entire ice edge is expected to shift to the south-southwest 10 to 20 nautical miles by Wednesday. Now for the marine forecasts here, again this evening from Cape Edgecombe to Cape Fairweather, gales out this evening, and then gales out the remainder of the stretch of the remainder of the coastline through tonight, and then dropping back to 20 knots. Staying a little brisk, 25 to 30 knots along the coast tomorrow, but definitely not gale force. And south to southeast up to 20 to 25 knots, strongest near Clarence Strait here over the southern areas. And then those become kind of light and variable. Here over the inside waters, 10 knots to predominantly north at 10 for Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. Northwesterly 15 knots for the south coast, easterlies up to 20 knots for the north coast, seas running anywhere from 8 to 11 feet through these areas. And for south central Alaska, northern Cook Inlet, north winds at about 15, and again north 25 south of the Forelands. Gales tonight here from the central coast across the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay and Shelikof Strait. Those end tonight, down to small craft advisories tomorrow. And the Monday forecast, even a little bit less, 15 to 20 knots here now for Shelikof Strait and east side of Kodiak Island. Small craft advisory still out even on Monday, down from the gales tonight here for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, and northeasterlies 10 knots north of the Forelands up to 20 knots south of the Forelands, and still mostly an easterly wind at 20 along the North Gulf Coast, variable to northeast at 15 for Prince William Sound. For Bristol Bay, north 25. Otherwise, northwest at 20 knots here for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and westerlies here from Sitkinak all the way over to Falls Pass at about 15. And for Monday, lighter winds in store for Bristol Bay out of the west mostly at about 15 with seas running up to 2 feet. Northwest 20 here with 5-foot seas on the Bering side of the peninsula. Northwesterlies 20, could be a few higher gusts out of the passes and bays here with seas running at roughly 7 feet. Farther to the west over the Fox Islands, small craft advisories tomorrow, northwesterlies 25 to 30 knots with westerlies 20 to 25 knots all the way out to Shimia, if not the Komodorskis. And then for Monday, northwesterlies, that low center developing, possibly moving to position right about here. So in advance of that front, 25 to 30 knot winds from the southeast, and then 25 knot small craft advisory winds wrapping back in around it from Adak just out to the west, then dropping back to 20 knots towards Shimia, and the Fox Islands under what's left of that high pressure ridge, westerlies 15 to maybe 20 knots with seas running 5 to 8 feet. And the southwest coast looks northerly, 20 to 25 knots, same forecast for St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea, and still could be some freezing spray off the ice edge here, 20 knots from the north for the Pribilofs. And then for Monday, under what's left of that high pressure ridge, light variable winds for the Pribilofs with seas coming probably less than the 7 feet that's shown there. Northwesterlies 15 here for the southwest coast, north of 20 for St. Lawrence Island, north 15 for St. Matthew Island with seas and ice-free waters. Actually, most of this covered now, but nothing more than 2 feet. And for the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow, brisk wind advisories here. Easterlies coming up to 25 knots, and then more of an east-northeast direction here, coming down 25 knots there from Point Hope up to Cape Lisburne and the Kotzebue Sound. North 25, strongest winds actually west of Kotzebue Sound will be lighter in the sound itself. And then definitely lighter winds in this area in store for Monday. Easterlies 25 knots on the western Arctic coast, northeast 25, some cases even 30 knots, and starting out 20 knots here for the central coast, but those will increase up to 25 to 30 knots by the late afternoon Monday there, even for the central coast. And looking at tonight's weather again, the gale warning's out from Cape Edgecombe all the way around the North Gulf Coast, the Barren Islands into Kamishak Bay and Shelikof Strait, as this stationary front slowly lifts northward and begins to weaken. Don't look for a whole lot of precipitation very far inland, mostly out along the coast in the form of rain. Could be some moisture getting up into the Wrangell Mountains, but generally a fair evening in over the interior. And then on the west side of that upper level trough, a swath of snow, light snow or flurries from the eastern Arctic coast back down in toward the Brooks Range, gradually shifting eastward a little bit there. And then the northerly winds, not much of a change from today here over the Bering Sea into the Aleutians, and a weakening weather front tries to push its way eastward out there in the west and is about ready to fall apart here. Weak high pressure in advance of that, low pressure moving up to near Kodiak Island tomorrow, and again a front or a band of moisture lifting northward in that south to north flow there, but the gale warnings will be ending in the areas, in the marine zones there, with drier conditions back out here to the west, and not too bad in the interior, maybe a few isolated rain or snow showers along that trough axis. And then for Monday, much the same pattern. That trough shifts a little bit to the west, but not a lot of weather associated.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.